Member Trujillo.
Hello, Member Trujillo here.
Good morning. This is Member Trujillo.
And for the record, no intervention petitions were received, gentlemen. Just wanted you to know that. So I just have one question before I open it up to the board. On the exhibit exhibit 1 that you referenced, there are different dates than the dates you are requesting. And that it's tacking a day on each side. So
It should actually be Friday through Monday. The same as
I think the numbers are wrong.
The dates are
yeah,
wrong.
it says Friday through Monday, but the dates
Yes.
are the 10th through the 13th, and it's really the 9th
9th
through the 12th, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We could just ask them.
No, we'll just deem them amended. I wanted to make sure there wasn't that inconsistency was. Member Decker.
So on page 2, under section B, I'm going to quote your language. Applicants herein request authority to adjust the rates charged for taxi service in Clark County to include a $10 Super Bowl surcharge fee on all trips performed within one of the designated taxi zones. And then it continues. Do you want to say within any of the is there a problem by saying one? Does it exclude the others? Does it? Do you want to say within any of the designated taxi zones?
Within any, yeah.
And again, similar to the F1 surcharge, the objective is that the surcharge would go into effect within zones, and then trips that originate in the zones and travel outside are those that originate outside of the zone but end within one of the applicable zones.
Say that one more time.
So the objective is.
Gave her tightly in her hand and secretly made a decision. She had to work hard and earn money to buy a house and a car. In the future, she.
Sorry.
Any trip that starts or ends within any zone or starts and ends within a zone would be applicable to.
So if I'm at Caesar's and I go to the Red Rock for dinner, you pay. It's going to apply. Okay.
Because you started in the
Yeah,
zone.
okay.
But if you go to Red Rock to Durango, no charge.
On the one of the questions about the notification and advising the public of this and trying to make it more official, my general manager and captain were suggesting to me we could probably put a QR code, now that people are using those, inside the taxi that will send the people directly to the Taxicab Authority link where they would be able to see the order, so that might be something that would allow us, not everybody does that, but if we put that in there, maybe that would make people feel more comfortable. I don't know, it was just a suggestion. I thought that I would let you guys know that's another possibility as far as ways to identify it, both at the airport and within the cab, that allows someone to see that, then they know it's not. Sending them to the official Taxicab Authority website.
I like Administrator Park's idea of putting the Taxicab Authority logo on the sign. It is, it's approved by the authority, so it's.
I agree, Member Decker. I was actually thinking not to make the placard too long, but perhaps even a line that says the Taxicab Authority of the state of Nevada has approved a Super Bowl surcharge, and then the rest of the language, and then put the agency logo there. Not the QR code.
We'll probably fit it right on there. Right?
Yeah.
Again, it's just another suggestion.
Seems, if there's enough room on this thing, you don't want it to have
right.
to be
Absolutely.
3x3 on the back of the seat. And then, Cheryl, how will this be handled at how will you proposing to handle this at the airport to fix the problem of the airport? I know you're going to coordinate with them not to take the sign down,
Yes.
but.
The same placard that is approved by the administrator that is going to have the Taxicab Authority's logo on it, we will have those made at Patrick Signs, larger than the little 6x6 cards. There is a risk that we might possibly overshadow some of the existing flat rates, because if you've ever been at the airport, you've seen it lists, the hotels and the zones. So some of that may be covered up. So there could be an alternative complaint that they didn't see what their rate was really going to be to Caesars, but we're going to have to make it work as best we can and make it large enough to address the complaints that were received and still, maintain the integrity of the existing signage.
And a couple of follow-up points, if I may, Chairman. Again, for purposes of the record, in addition to there being no interveners, all of the other industry members were notified pursuant to the application. I did send a certified copy to each of the other industry members. There were no objections made, no interveners, so I wanted that noted for the record. Additionally, at last week's Nevada Transportation Authority board meeting, they approved a modified Super Bowl application in which carriers can come in and ask to temporarily expand their authority and to modify their rates specific to the Super Bowl. Much longer extended time than what the taxi industry is proposing here. I did note the fact that we had the complaints specific to F1, but I think because of the fact that there is such a large demand to service private charter planes that corresponds with limos, that may be one of the reasons why they are extending their temporary Super Bowl period significantly longer than the Taxicab Authority. But I think it's important that you know, again, what the other commercial carriers are planning specific to the Super Bowl.
Does the enlarged temporary zone that we are adding include any area that will be inadvertently and adversely affected, totally unrelated to Super Bowl? I'm just looking at the boundaries and I'm wondering, is there anything inside that boundary? Or is that boundary created by what you understand to be road closures, or how did you come up with that? And are we inadvertently putting a surcharge on somebody taking a cab from a condo to a doctor's office or something like that?
I can't say that we're not inadvertently doing that. I don't know that for a fact. Brent Bell is on the Super Bowl committee and has gone to a lot of these meetings. And my understanding is that these streets were based on road closures and had to do with what he gleaned out of those meetings with the Super Bowl. But yeah, I can't say for sure that there's not a motel or hotel inside of there that someone is staying at that's next to a medical facility, that they're visiting somebody or something, that this could affect them. I mean, again, it's happening for a very short time. It's noon on Friday to just noon on Monday.
But it is also, so therefore, I take your point, Mr. Belvin, that to that effect, it has a minor impact on other commercial activity other than what's going to be the main commercial activity at the time. But if these are if this boundary is related to road closures and whatnot, the driver should be incented to pick up the person at the condo and take them to the doctor's office.
True.
To put up with the road closure. So I'm not thinking that it's inappropriate. I just wanted to make sure we vetted, because it's a fairly large area that's being added.
Chair, I have a question. So going along with Member Soderberg's line of questioning, I like the idea of this to accomplish a purpose. If it accomplishes that purpose, we don't know really if it did, if it incentivized drivers to not be on vacation and on app. But my concern with the request is that it's not outlined in your request what you're going to do with the incentive. So I think previously when we discussed this, it was very specific that a certain percentage was going to go to the drivers if they were employees versus if they were leased. And there's a outline of what the issue is, and then there's an outline of what you're requesting, but there isn't an outline in the order of what you're going to do with the fee. And I liked it previously when it was very specifically spelled out. Because my concern is, my overall concern is that rides went down 50% since last year in those specific dates during F1. I don't know if that represents the entire year, but if rides are going down, then there is a worry, or maybe a perception that the surcharges are being used to compensate the companies for rides going down in the form of higher fees. And I want to make sure that that's not what's happening, and that it doesn't appear that that might be what's happening.
Well, for our companies, there would be no change as to what you'd seen during F1. The employee drivers, based on their union contract, receive a certain percentage. The lease drivers would receive the full amount, and they just still pay their actual lease fee. So our pay structure for our employees never changes, because we are bound by a collective bargaining agreement, and our lease rates have not changed.
And I absolutely believe you, and I assume that would be true. I just think maybe it would be clear for anybody besides the people in this room if it was actually stated in the order.
Stated a little bit differently, the previous order actually recognized that 43% was going.
That's the average.
Yeah, an average of
I can't
43
speak
was
for the other
going to an employee driver, and 100% was going to a lease driver. Is that still?
That is still appropriate at our company, as it averages to about 43%. I can't speak to what the pay structure is at the other company.
Same at ours.
So an
100% lease, and it's between 41 and 43 based on your seniority for employee drivers. So
It's probably a legal thing that I'll leave to you, but I wanted to.
No, appropriate, because we shouldn't just assume it's going to be the same. We should have the record that it's going to be the same. Number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I looked at the application, and Mr. Balaban testified that stopping and starting at noon actually worked very well. That's the first thing that jumped out at me when I looked at this, so that answered that question. But you're expanding zones. Is there a confidence that at 12 noon on Monday, the cab will know that the zones have changed?
above my pay rate.
Okay.
Chris Bordenero with Captain, for the record. What was it? Could you repeat the question?
Well, there's programming involved.
Yes.
And in this surcharge, different from the other surcharge, we've actually changed the zones. And previous testimony is that that worked really well. The surcharge dropped off about when it was supposed to. And that's great. That was good news to hear. But now that we're changing the zones, on Monday at noon, those zones change. And I know not all cabs go back to the company and then go back out. Drivers are going to be out there. And at 11:30, they'll have a ride. And at 12:30, they'll have a ride. Are you confident that the systems, the meters within each of these cabs is going to know that the zones are different 1 hour later?
Yes, 100%. So we program in not only the zone, but the time of day of when that takes effect and when it stops taking effect, right? So similar to what we did the very same thing with F1. There's that sliver of a zone to the east, that orange zone that we added. Very same thing happened. Once F1 was over and that time stopped, the next time the meter engaged, it completely disregards that extra zone that we created.
So this will be the same process of having a tariff 2.
Exactly. Exactly. The orange zone is just in a different area now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good news. Ms. Rushton, maybe you could answer this, maybe one of your clients can answer. At the last surcharge, you had applied initially for a $10 surcharge and then amended that application at the meeting for 15. Now you are asking for 10. I know Super Bowl is different than F1 vis-a-vis what disruption there is in ground transportation. Could you walk us through the logic for a $10 surcharge versus a 5 or a 15?
Now we're defer to Cheryl.
Well,
with
in
respect to the
theory, you've
decision.
answered your own question. The $15, when we spoke with our drivers, that's why we had come before you and asked to increase it, because they just didn't think that 10 was going to be enough. Because F1 was massive in just the effect that it was going to have on ground transportation. The Super Bowl is not going to have as much of an effect. $5, the drivers still don't feel that $5 is worth anything. You can't get a cup of coffee and a donut for $5. $10 gets their attention. And it's also not going to be as painful for the riding public. I think the 15, even though we feel it was warranted for F1, was not as well received as we would have liked by the public when they first got in the vehicles. We think that $10 is going to go over much more smoothly.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, when we're looking at post-event data, that would be, in my mind, an interesting comparison. I know the events are different and we can't ask the industry to completely deal with that variable, but that would be something I would be curious as to the effect on incentivizing drivers with a $10 surcharge versus the effect of a $15 surcharge, both leased and driven. And that way we can, if we're going to be continuing to do this, we will learn more and at some point come up with an ideal number or various ideal numbers depending on the actual event that's going on and how it's impacting. So I'd appreciate that if that were something that they're asked to look at and compare.
In addition to that, Vice Chairman Soderberg, I think that we have more knowledge now with respect to the traffic flow and the patterns that are anticipated around the period of the Super Bowl and where those loading zones will be. I would defer to Acting Director Park. He can tell you that really up until the beginning of F1, there was lack of uncertainty. There was so much uncertainty relative to the traffic and where the loading zones would be. So now that we have that information, again, as Cheryl reported, the objective is simply, again, to incentivize the drivers, but to not have such sticker shock to the traveling public that dissuades them from using a taxi. So I think I've added to my list in terms of things that we need to include in the order, the specific statistics relative to the driver increase as a result of utilizing the surcharge, and then explanation or kind of analysis as to the $10 rate versus the $15 rate and whether or not it was justified here and should have been adjusted accordingly.
Do we have any sense, does the industry have any sense, or does the administrator have any sense of the number of tourists, visitors between F1 and Super Bowl? Is it roughly the same? Are we expecting the same number of people in town, or are we expecting Super Bowl to be 60% more, or, do we have any idea?
Well, I don't have a percentage, but I think one thing that's going to be more favorable for Super Bowl is it's spread out all over the town, and F1 was really concentrated. So the numbers may be the same, but the concentration of where people are going to be at one time is going to be different. So I think that will help during the Super Bowl compared to F1.
Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, Super Bowl is a big weekend in Vegas, regardless of whether the actual game is here.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, full is full, so I don't know really, right? It's hard to say. But I do agree 100% that you're not closing the strip, right? So being able to get around and the day of the game, while there are events at the convention center and, I mean, the Super Bowl things are going on at a lot of different places. I mean, the big traffic going into Allegiant is going to be on Sunday, right? So,
Theoretically, the access, which is the obstacle to drivers wanting to be on the road during F1, is going to be less of an obstacle during Super Bowl because they're not closing down half of the restaurant.
Well, and I think, Mr. Bellin, you hit to your point, the conundrum in my mind, which is Super Bowl is always a big visitor draw for Las Vegas anyway. So I think we're likely, we can gather the statistics, but I think there's going to be a difficulty in parsing what the regular Super Bowl visitor count would be versus because the game is here. I mean, I'm sure we'll be able to see deplanings at McCarran, and they'll probably, NDOT will be able to tell us how many more cars came across the state line or something like that, but it's going to be imperfect. That's why at one level I'm more comfortable with a lower surcharge, because I can see the group of folks who come to Vegas every Super Bowl don't have tickets to go, can't afford the tickets to go, but they're going to be at the sports book, and they've been at the sports book the last 10 years because that's a thing they do. And they're now going to pay the surcharge, and they're not, from their perspective, they're not doing anything different than they ever did. So I think that's one of the, I'm not sure quite how to get to that metric. And it's not a metric that I think the industry or even the administrator can give us. It's a metric that's more macroeconomic. So.
Realistically, you have so many hotel rooms in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
If they're all filled up, we're going to know basically what the number is.
Right.
But again, it's going to be way more spread out than it was for F1.
I also think you can make an argument for putting a surcharge on every Raider game because our drivers can't get in and out of there. And they need some kind of an incentive to go over there. The drivers, they get cited, people jump out of the cab, then the driver gets cited. It's a real mess, and the drivers need help on those game days.
But I've always thought that was as much a function of, and I'm not casting aspersions, and just as a function of the manner in which the stadium has chosen to queue public transportation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it's still the drivers got the challenge.
But are we then punishing the stadium?
When they were
Not
building,
punishing, but we're extracting a surcharge because there's a stadium here. I'm not sure I want to go down that road.
when Allegiant was being built, I sent multiple emails to them telling about my experience and our cabinet partners, that we have a lot of experience and we'd like to be part of the planning of the cab stands, and I couldn't get one response from them at all.
As a former administrator of the Taxicab Authority, I can attest to that fact, yeah, as well.
I've heard this issue since I was a member, so.
I guess
They were still building it, and we were hearing this was going to be
to the chair's point, though, the people that come here every 10 years to stay on the strip and gamble at the sports books, those same people are going to show up anyway. There's no difference in access or transportation from any weekend in which people are coming here, whether, I think specifically though, the problem is access because of the stadium, in and out of the stadium. So would it make sense to affect the surcharge only in that new zone that includes the stadium? Because that's where the traffic and access problems occur that make the drivers not want to. You might have drivers that say, I got no problem going from, the Wynn to the Tropicana. I just don't want to go into
I understand that, but what that doesn't address is the fact that we are competing with the TNC for drivers, and the drivers during this business are going to go work at a TNC that's going to surcharge, dynamically price, or be stuck in a taxi cab with our low rates. So putting the surcharges on is going to hopefully have our drivers decide to work for us rather than for them. And that is the case. The drivers, just like customers, go where the money is, right? So if our drivers can go drive Friday and Saturday night on Super Bowl weekend for a TNC, and it's the entire time it's under a surcharge, that's what they're gonna do. They're not gonna drive a taxi cab. That's just the way it goes. So, I mean, I don't know what the exact number is, but that's what we're dealing with is that the drivers just are gonna move like any of us would I think that the cab drivers like being cab drivers and will stay being cab drivers, but not if they can make so much extra money going and doing something and then come back to driving cab when it's over. So that's kind of why we went down this road is about trying to incentivize the drivers to stay. Reward's not the right word, but compensate them for this. It's we don't know how it's going to play out with those people that have come here for the last 20 years and now have to pay more. That's true. That is going to be something they're going to say, this has never happened before. I mean, I had people that work in the casino industry that had taken cabs that during F1 said to me, that's just complete BS that you guys did that. I said, did you raise your room rates any? Like, well, that's different. I'm like, how's that different? He said, well, we did that to tourists. You guys did it to locals. I'm like, well, only to locals that were on the strip during F1. But yeah, I mean, they look at our rates and say, they've been there forever, so that's where they should stay. Kind of aggravating.
So I guess the point of that is if I show you a Nevada driver's license with a local address, then I don't pay the surcharge.
Don't pay the surcharge.
That would be that seems like an administrative nightmare.
Yeah. Fake IDs everywhere. Have to have your Nevada ID.
I don't remember a lot of the casinos offering free parking to locals anyway. So I'm not
well, it is, so Member Graff, go ahead. I'm sorry, were you done?
I'm done.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understand the geographics of it. So I wear these for a reason, so I didn't really see the map that well, and it doesn't have a before or after. I want to just make sure of a couple of things. In the application, and the last paragraph of the first paragraph of page 2, the last couple of sentences is talking about the geographics. So then it starts off by saying, recognizing this, applicants request authority to extend the airport strip corridor zones as follows. So how many zones are affected by that designation? Just
zone 1, right?
Yes.
We created a new zone.
It's a new zone.
Right, it's the orange zone isn't part of the flat rate zone. So the flat rate zones, the pink, the green, the purple, how they're color coded, those are just for respective rides from those zones to the airport and rental car center, and then back the other way, right?
Those are the standard rates that are
For
in place.
flat rates, right, for flat rates. So the orange area that we're talking about is just for the fare surcharge.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
It does. And what zone is being increased to include Allegiant Stadium? Just zone 1?
It's a new zone altogether, right?
Well, yeah, I think the intent was the blue section for the new stadium would be part of zone 1.
Yes.
Say that again?
That's where I was getting confused.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's not extending, it's really adding. And that
Are you adding or are you extending zone 1? I think that's the question.
We added Allegiant Stadium into
To be part of zone 1 for the flat rates.
To be
So the
part of
blue
zone
box-
1 for the flat rates. Then we created an entirely new orange zone that just applies as going in or out or between. But if you go from the airport to that orange, that's not a flat rate. If you went from the airport to Allegiant, it is a flat rate.
Because Allegiant is already in zone 1. Is that why you're saying that?
No,
It was not
be in this
It's not in
case.
zone 1. That's
It's
during Super
normally
Bowl,
not
it
in
would-
zone 1, just during this time
Because it's
frame.
on the
Friday
other side
to
of the freeway, right?
Friday to Monday, it will become in zone 1, so it will be a flat rate ride to and from Allegiant during this time.
Yes.
Okay.
But all the rest of the orange around this is not a flat rate. It is just a zone when you're talking about going in and out of it or between it, that it has the $10 on it
for the purposes of the surcharge.
for the
Yes.
purposes of the
Okay,
surcharge.
so that's where my confusion lay in terms of that.
Does that
And
make
that-
sense?
It does make sense, I get it, but here's the other question. So the second question is, this is all temporary, right?
Yeah.
This is just for the surcharge, it's not anything else. So that it just doesn't say anywhere in that paragraph or anything that's describing these geographic zones, this new zone, or anything else that's temporary. So I want to make sure that we're clear on the record, everybody's understood that the new orange zones, the expansion of the zone 1, that's just temporary for purposes of this surcharge.
Noon
Yes.
Friday to noon Monday.
From Friday to,
So that's everybody's in agreement, that's tariff 2.
yes.
Yes.
Member Graff, to your point, I will work with the administrator with respect to drafting the order and ensure that that's clarified in red. Tariff 2 temporarily, between the period and be more specific.
Any other questions?
No, that was it.
Member Trujillo, do you have questions?
He's no longer on.
He fell off.
He fell off.
Okay. Additional questions? Staff have any questions? No, sir. You have that, I have a follow-up question. You have that trial lawyer look on.
Does anybody else in the industry have any questions
Or comments?
or comments?
You good?
Yes, sir, I'm good. I want to make sure
I want to
that,
make sure he's good too, because Mario hasn't said anything.
I just want to make sure that you guys are good with Ms. Rushton and I working together on the order.
So on the order, my request is that you track the previous order, which, thank you for drafting this, Rushton, but I do recall making a number of public policy findings that weren't in the first draft. So I'd like those same public policy findings
Yes, sir.
to be repeated. So before it gets to me. And then so that we're clear, so the record is clear, the portion of the order that specifies post-surcharge reporting will include the same metrics that we did last time, because we're going to want to make the compare contrast analysis, but we'll also include a requirement that as to F1, you will provide the driver attendance data that we discussed previously, which is, I think, for my purposes, subject to other members, the 2 weeks preceding the event, and 1 week following the event for both events, which will then give us a compare contrast on whether we're actually achieving some delta in employee behavior. And I say it that way because I'm pretty sure, anecdotally at least, that it drives leasehold drivers. If they're getting 100% of the surcharge, they are significantly changing their per ride number. Less so when you're, on a union contract and it's 43%. Not that it's immaterial to the employee driver, but I just think that's likely not as big a driver, big a motivator. Yeah. So any other statistical points?
Mr. Chairman, I just clarify what you had just directed industry and the administrator to do. I think it would be useful to have that statistic with lease drivers separated from the actual employee
I
drivers
think,
to see
yeah.
if there is a difference.
Oh, Mr. Balaban.
There may
said-
not be, but.
Yeah, no, Mr. Balaban already said, explained, to the extent the record's not clear, we want to segregate apples to apples, right? Leases and employees, because we need to figure out it, and we will, I think, if this is approved, naturally have some statistical idea about what a $15 and a $10 does. Any other desires for the statistics?
Do we have the ability to say vehicles in service versus vehicles down versus potential fleet that should or could be on the road versus was on the road? Kind of like the statistics that we'll go through here in a few minutes about.
So the vehicles down might be a little bit more difficult because you could have a vehicle down on Monday and it be on the road on Tuesday. That. I mean, our breakdown sheet changes
Kind of like
throughout the day.
occupancy rate, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
I can tell you for our company, we didn't send anybody home because we didn't have enough vehicles.
But you'll be already capturing how many vehicles were out of service that month.
Yes.
So we'll have a monthly number. I do understand Cheryl's point, which is.
It's a moving target.
It may be a little dicey to say per day because it may be out of service on one day, but not the other two.
I'm just trying to get a better, accurate picture for what we're talking about in terms of employees coming and working for the cabs versus working TNCs. So I want to make sure that if there are vehicles available, that it's a function of, we want to get the drivers there and driving the vehicles. And if, I think that that's going to be indicative of whether or not the $10 gets them there and does it.
My
Or
problem
partly.
isn't a lack of vehicles. My problem is ultimately a lack of drivers across the board, so.
I was going to say the same thing. There's no limit. There's a 12-hour limit on how long the driver can drive. There's not any limit on how long you can beat that car.
Well, and we know on any given day that companies have more medallions and
Yeah,
vehicles than
that's
they
right.
deploy.
And they have vehicles.
So I mean, that could be assumed that it might be notable if there was a situation in which you couldn't deploy
Deploy your
a driver
medallions,
because you
right.
didn't have a car, but I'm guessing that probably doesn't happen very often, if ever.
No.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
You do have that instance? So
No,
you
we don't.
don't have a driver, but you have a car?
No, the opposite.
Oh, you have a driver, but you don't have a car?
Yes.
You ought to buy some.
That would happen at my company.
Sorry, I have a driver, but I don't have a medallion.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
You have a driver, you have a car, but not a medallion.
That's
Huh.
what
So I think that may be where member Graff is going with
Yeah,
respect to the
kinda.
number of authorized medallions and how many were actually operated per shift.
Yes,
That's
that is something that we talked about
okay.
at the last
Yeah,
meeting.
let's add that metric because that may also indicate that another remedy is that we need to have temporary medallions issued during these time periods,
kind of an occupancy.
right?
Yeah.
More,
Yeah.
create more
Again, you're gonna
hotel,
look at these and decide whether this. works
create
or
more
doesn't work.
hotel rooms essentially.
Yes.
And we have the authority by order to, on application, to adjust the number of medallions for a temporary period.
Well,
Good point.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
more information is always good.
that's assuming that what you're talking about is occurring during one of these events, which we don't know that that's necessarily the case, might be occurring every weekend. That's something you'd have to present to us.
Mhm.
Any other guidance from members? Is that Member Trujillo still not with us? Administrator, do you need any more guidance?
No, I don't think so. I think we can get that provided for you.
Do you wish to make any closing statement other than please grant this?
Please not ask for more.
One point of clarification, Chair, is the specific statistics that you're looking for. I've identified those and I will confirm them specifically with the administrative part, but that is applicable to the entire industry versus just the applicants before you
Correct.
today.
Yeah.
So
As
that
it
you have a
was-
complete.
As it was last time.
Yes. Surcharge.
Yeah, I will state what I think your point is, and Administrator, you will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure every company submitted the statistics that were ordered last time.
Correct.
Which causes me to want to add into the order, but I don't believe I have the authority that there will be $100 fine per day for failure to produce.
So that penalty in some fashion exists in law currently, and the agency could impose that if
Yeah.
they wanted to cite somebody for failing to comply with.
So I'm hopeful that this discussion will empower the administrator to encourage those who didn't submit to submit, so that you can, but I do sincerely appreciate the captain-related companies for giving us something roughly on time, because if we had to make a decision on this application with no idea about what happened at F1, I think we'd be in a more difficult place than we are today.
Chair, based on the fact that the applicable surcharge, if approved, would end on the 12th, would it be acceptable to put in the order that the statistics will be provided no later than February 28th? I think that our group believes that we could easily get those statistics to you by that time.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I was going to say, I was going to do the same thing, which was like March 5th, the month following. We gave you till November 5th, so you could close out a month in case that was,
I'll include that.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
assuming March 5th is a business day. Which gives the staff enough time to, do any massaging to the report that they want to do before they submit it to us. Anything further?
No, sir. Other than, again, thank you for your consideration of the application before you. And if there have been any further questions, happy to answer those. Otherwise, we request that you approve the application and the authorization to impose the $10 surcharge.
Any questions?
Well, I have one other question. If we don't, are we taking a vote today? And if we don't approve it, is there time for you to submit the corrected order at the next meeting in time
Corrected
for?
order or corrected application?
Or corrected application, sorry, corrected application, in time for us to vote on it next meeting, in time for the event, and for it to be effective?
So my answer to the question is, the reason I told the administrator I wanted this on the December agenda was if we weren't going to take action, it probably foreclosed it to effectively, it might foreclose it without a special meeting. So the answer is we could hold a special meeting. A little sage for you, though, that like we're not going to be meeting at the regular date in January because the hearing room's not available. So we'll be meeting deeper in the month than we would be normally. So that's another complicating factor. So if we don't pass it today, we would have to fast track an amended application.
For a special meeting.
And a special meeting.
Gotcha, okay.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Any discussion back at amongst us? Or is somebody ready to make a motion and then we can discuss the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. I move that the board approve the application as filed with the additional data requested by the board in its discussion as part of a compliance item.
Your second?
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded, Soderberg and Graff. Discussion.
I
So you
would-
don't want to vote on it? No.
No, I would not be inclined to approve it today because I would much prefer there be an amended application and for things to be a little more clear and concrete than they are. However, realizing that there isn't time for that, then I understand that the motion and the approval from the board comes with the conditions that we've discussed, and then I don't have a problem voting for it in theory. Practically, I agree with the surcharge idea. Be nice if it was wrapped up in a little bit of a bow.
So you're not opposed to the surcharge, it's that you wanted more clarification in the application, and did you not get it from the discussion, or?
No, I did.
Okay.
It'd just be nice if there was time for the application to be amended and for it to be a little bit more clear. Again, I'm concerned that on its own, as it exists, the application could be taken out of context. But I would vote to approve. I'm for the surcharge. I think it's still a losing proposition for the industry because for every board meeting they attend and application that's submitted for a surcharge, the TNCs can literally in real time adjust their prices to gain themselves an advantage. So I think it's the least we can do, and I'm for it overall, and I think it's a good thing. It's just the application is completed. We've completed it on the record. So I would vote for it. It's just not as neat as I might like.
So my additional comfort to you, Member Decker, is we'll circulate. Last time we did not have enough time, but we will circulate the draft order for comment amongst the board members. If you think it doesn't, that the order doesn't flesh out where the application didn't, with no aspersions, Ms. Rushton, I believe we addressed some of the same issues in the last order. Ms. Rushton gave us a very solid starting point, but we fleshed it out. Administrator Armstrong and I did. So we'll do the same and draft and circulate it. And if we've left an ambiguity in some sense that people are uncomfortable with, then we can also, provide it is consistent with the record we created today, shore that up in the order.
Then I have no concerns.
Anything? You made the motion.
I made the motion. I'm
You
happy.
made the second. Member Trujillo Zonas? No, he is not. Having received a motion and a second and having discussed it, we'll take the vote. All those in favor of the motion as made, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Indicate Member Trujillo always did not participate in the vote. That concludes agenda item 6. On to agenda item 7, which is staff reports. Administrator.
Chairman, we've been speaking about statistics quite a bit here in the last hour. If you don't mind, I'd just soon have our MA2 go over our agency stats, which may give some clarification on some of the things that we've discussed already, some of the things that we've talked about. If you'd rather, I can go ahead and go with the other way.
No, I believe he probably prepared them, so
He
let him
did.
report on them.
He did.
For the record again, Curtis Mell, Taxicab Authority Management Analyst. I'll go quickly over it. We won't go. We know that the numbers were down overall for the month.
We have the room till 5 o'clock.
Yeah. There was definitely down. Our trips for the month were 1,008,000, which is down almost 12% for the year prior and over 21% from October. The good thing, though, is there was an increase in per trip revenue for both employee and lease. Employees are up to over $24 a trip from a previous month was $21.94. So there is an increase just in that, that you can see reflected probably with the surcharge increase. I'm sure had a great effect on that. So lease trip revenue up to $24.60 for the month from $22.48 from October. So those are good numbers to have. Trips for the year, we're at almost 12.5 million. We're just below last year at this time. Hopefully we can break last year's. It'll probably be close. The revenue overall should be more because of the increases in the rates.
The general rate.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
the
general
rate,
rate.
yeah, the general rate increase that we had earlier in the year should have revenue higher than the year prior. Come January, I'll try to put together a whole year analysis to show a little bit more. No change in the medallions, but we did have an increase of 110 lease medallions. So we're up to 1,353 lease vehicles out there or medallions. And the numbers on the disabled and elderly requested rides are down as well. Mostly just to reflect the down in trips as well. Credit card transactions down as well. That's the negative news. We'll keep that quick. Onto the agency stats. We did have an increase in citations written, more officers out there monitoring things. We did have 7 impounds or no CPCN numbers, which is the UPTs. So, and that's an increase over the previous month. So that's good. We're getting more of the illegal ones off of the road. Resolved 57 of the violations. We were still very low on court for hearings other than the UPT hearings, which were heard, but we haven't had, as you are aware of our attorney status, that we haven't had a hearing officer and have been renting them as we can. But
Our
it is
friends at the TSA are still helping.
the NTA.
NTA, I'm sorry, NTA.
Yes.
Freudian slip.
If the TSA has hearing officers, I'm sure we
Yeah,
can.
we can, yeah.
They probably wouldn't have the skill set.
But with progressing, we've been, doing more with less as we have been improving. But it's good. It is a positive note. You can see the dispatch events that we had for the month for a total of 743 calls into dispatch. You can see there at the end of page 1 and onto page 2 where the F1 related, we were able to get that into there to just kind of reflect. So that was some of the things that administrator had talked about earlier on there. Nothing too different out of the ordinary otherwise than that. There's a list of the 61 citations that were written as well. And then the monthly vehicle reports on how many inspections, accidents, meter seals, and how many new cabs were put into service. Earlier, what you're talking about on the vehicles that have been put out of service, that's the OSN issued. So for clarification, that is out of service notice. It is a hard area to track on a daily basis because between that and the next page, which is cabs and service is what we have allowed, what we've approved, we've signed off and put it in our system as, so that 2848 number is how many available cabs there are to be used. When we put them out of service due to an accident or something like that is not reflected in that number, but that is a much harder number to keep track of because like the industry was talking, it changes every day. It can change on the hour because somebody puts one out of service and then immediately we put it right back in. So it is a hard metric to analyze. It would be a very detailed. So there was an increase over overall in the cabs and
Before you move
service.
off of that,
Mhm.
but if I look at that 2848 number, which I did, and compare it to page 7 of the captain report, that shows a fairly high level of utilization. Does it not?
Yes,
Like
Yeah.
2848 versus 24 and some change, not to give up
Yeah.
a confidential. So
Right.
like only a 400 Delta vehicles not in
Mhm.
use during
but we
F1.
have the medallions available of 3,500
Right.
that we could be out there, but yeah, this is, 28 is the maximum that will be on the road at any time right now.
But the medallions may be held by somebody that's underutilizing,
Yes.
as Mr. Balaban pointed out, and there may be companies that could use more.
Correct.
Yeah.
So on the last page, you had mentioned before, I put a couple of graphs in there just to kind of show a history of the cabs and what we've had, and then also overall trips and revenue that we've had for the cabs. I went back as far as 14 is what I could find with some accuracy of what we had in there. And you can see when things were good back in 16, we had 3,600 plus cabs in there. We were over that 3,500 medallion limit. There was an excess. Unfortunately, the world kept revolving and things kept changing. But we are increasing. As you can see, the numbers are coming back up. That's a positive thing. And the industry is, we keep hearing it, as the administrator and myself have been out in the industry. They are getting new vehicles. The inspectors are out there putting them in service. So I expect that number to keep growing, which is a good
thought these
positive.
two charts were very helpful. They've given a snapshot of.
Yeah, and the final one is just an overview since as far back as 2009, what the trips and revenue have been and how we were impacted. You can see easily with the TNCs that came in and then the pandemic. That's all I have, nice and sweet.
Any
Sure.
Any questions on the statistics?
Sure, and this is for the administrator. UPTs are down, citations are down, they're good citations, because obviously there's stats on negotiated out, no contest are good. It's been a rough month in law enforcement. So is that impacting the agency in your operations?
I think so. I think we're fully staffed with the allocations that we have right now in enforcement. There's a couple of issues that come to mind with that. We're not fully staffed for dispatch. We can't have officers out. We don't have dispatchers. So that's going to affect our statistics as well. Another thing is we just have gotten 2 new officers, so we were in the process of training them. And then the third thing, like Curtis had talked about, we're still borrowing a hearing officer. And so we have to try to have that balance going. So, yeah.
And second question, is not having a radio also affecting you operationally? And if so, do we know when you're getting your radios?
Yeah, I'm going to address that when I speak, but actually, we do have a radio system that's working pretty well. It's not the radio system we want. We obviously need to work on our dispatch system, and I can just address that right now if you're done with the statistic part, or
There may be, we can wait till you're,
Okay.
yeah, in case
I
there are
don't-
any other questions.
There's not any open meeting law issue where in one area you don't have to segregate it.
Okay, so we have met with L3 Harris several times. We emailed back and forth. We have the quotes on 2 of the 3 sections that we need, the recorder, the portable radios. We have not gotten the quote on dispatch, and we have tried. In fact, Curtis has moved it up to the director's office. And as soon as we get that, the money's there, we're ready to move forward. We would really like to get those radios in place prior to the Super Bowl if we can. We actually do have a training coming up in January. In March?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was in,
For the radios?
yeah.
Yeah, that, we're in the second class of that, so it's March.
Okay. my apologies. I was hoping to have that before we had the radios and before we had the Super Bowl, but evidently that's not going to happen. But we are in the process of getting the radio situation taken care of. And our officers are safe because they do have the sonams, and they seem to be working fairly well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions on the statistical report? Hearing none. Other reporting items?
Again, I'd like to thank Commissioner Gruber from the NTA and thank Judge Carl Brown for stepping in and helping us with our hearings. Judge Brown has been amazing. Last week, we interviewed candidates for our attorney position, and as of yesterday, we've offered a job to somebody. They're actually here in the audience, but I said I wasn't going to introduce her yet until she actually starts. We also have hired a legal secretary, and so we have a legal department now, and I'm really excited about that, yes. And because we have a pile of things that need to be taken care of, so we're excited about that. In the same vein, management analyst 2, Curtis's counterpart, be doing interviews in either the first or second week of January. We've got a list now, and I've gone through the applicants and chosen several people to interview, so we're moving forward with that. We have some other positions available. We've got recruitments out there. Some of the positions we're not getting any applicants for. I think it's probably a pay issue. But we're trying to get those positions filled as soon as we can as well. So, and we've actually been able to promote within the agency, which I really like to do when I can. So we're moving forward with those. I know Member Decker was out at the UNLV shooting. We had several of our officers that were there as well. It's a sad day. And like Member Decker said, it's been a rough time for enforcement this last month. And it's been my whole career. And my heart goes out to the people that have lost loved ones this past month. So I just wanted to let that know. We've talked about the radio system. Update on fleet. My fleet person is working with the state and how we're going to handle our fleet going forward, whether or not we're going to go to fleet services or continue to own our own vehicles. I've had a meeting with the director about this, and we're going to make some decisions next week about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. I have a meeting with the fleet guy from the state next week as well. The NTA has reached out to us. They have a different set of issues when it comes to these large events like Super Bowl and F1 because they're putting so many buses into service that come in from out of state. It's a daunting task. That's where I was at for 6.5 years before I came here. I know how daunting of a task it is. We are going to help them. They want us in the wings as plan B if they need more people to go out and help assist with inspecting buses and things like that. So I will be requesting some overtime hours for that. If they don't need us and we don't need to use it for that, then that's fine. I am also going to request overtime hours just to work the Super Bowl because of it's such a large event. We had done the same thing for F1.
Context, before you're becoming interim, Administrator Armstrong and I made that consistent representations to the governor's office that we would be ready, and if we had to, we'd do the overtime thing.
Good.
And my advice is start spending some of that reserve. So you can spend it on overtime. Great.
Yes.
Pardon?
Start spending some of that reserve.
Yeah.
And if you can start spending it on overtime, then even better.
I have a lot of plans to spend that reserve.
Every administrator is I got that same
Um,
attention.
Curtis and I have been going out to the industry. I think we've met with every company. And there's some common themes that we're finding there. They have a difficult time with drivers. They have a difficult time finding drivers, keeping drivers. And one thing that I've tried to portray to all of the agencies is this agency is there to help them. We're there to enforce, but we're also there to help them. And the communication lines need to be opened up more than what I've seen in the past. One thing that I've done as the administrators, I've asked my sergeants to go out and try to get to a cab company a couple of times a month and just have coffee or talk with them about industry problems. And I hope that's going to help the communication between the agencies. I spoke briefly about our new director and his vision. I'm excited about where he wants to take business and industry, and
Be careful.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then. No, he's very forward thinking, and I appreciate his input into what we want to do. And I've met with our staff about places that we want to go with the agency, and I just see things continuing to get bigger, better, stronger, and more efficient. So that's about all I got.
Any questions?
I don't have a question as much as a comment. As the administrator mentioned, we've had a rough month in law enforcement. We lost 2 troopers tragically. Before we could have their processions and funerals, we had an active shooter event at UNLV in which every law enforcement officer in Southern Nevada responded to. I was very happy to see the Taxicab Authority officers there representing the agency, ready to help the community. I appreciate you letting them go, sending them. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yes, we're going to take care of our own.
Anything?
I have nothing.
Ralph, questions, comments?
Is the issue of fleet versus zone, is that something that we consider, or is that completely an agency issue?
Kind of an agency issue with a recommendation, strong recommendation, that they maintain an owned vehicle fleet. But
That's been Member Decker's position
Right.
since he was acting.
it's very easy to go from an owned fleet to a fleet services fleet. It's impossible to go back if you don't like it.
So
And I have had personal experience at different agencies with both. So I have an opinion on one versus the other.
And there's good and bad to both. There's good and bad to both, so, yeah.
So my only response to your query is I think the board members can have their individual positions on this. I think it is really an administrative decision for the executive branch with the following observation. If it were somehow to injure the mission, then it would be incumbent upon us to be told it's injuring the mission and bring that to the public attention, because that's kind of our function. So do no harm, I guess, is my.
That's my plan.
That was my comment previously to Member Decker when he was acting administrator. Do no harm.
And I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I have one other thing. You mentioned earlier, I had it on my list. I would like to recognize that the new Director of Business and Industry, Dr. Chris Sanchez, is in the room. Invite him to come up and speak if he'd like to. I thought maybe he was trying to be incognito, and I'm going to call you out. Sorry. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and give me the opportunity to say hello and just know, I think, as Director Park was starting to mention, I think it's important to talk about my priorities just briefly, which are people and technology. So I view my job as supporting everybody that works in business and industry. And over the first month, it was the first month as of Thursday of last week, I was able to visit all 15 offices, and all the staff, with the exception of folks on vacation and holiday, are out sick. and made a point to provide an opportunity to hear from them. I am rolling out a number of initiatives internally that are really focused on getting a good appreciation of where we are in terms of this agency's budget, where we have gaps in some of our divisions, and empowering all of our administrators to have control over their budget and to remove hurdles that may have grown over the years with internal P&P that have gotten in the way, that frankly people can't remember who, what, why, and when, but they're there. So we are going to eliminate those. And then working very closely with the governor's office on making sure that this agency is resourced correctly and that we solve some of the issues that are in administration that impact our ability to hire the right folks in a timely fashion to get them up to speed and trained and ready to do their job. I'll just end my brief remarks by saying that I've been very impressed with the staff at Business and Industry. We have a lot of dedicated folks, many of them seasoned, been around the agency for many years. And it's time that the state show up and support them in the job that they do. So thank you for the opportunity to say hello and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you. Anything from legal counsel?
Nothing to report.
And any future agenda items?
Mr. Chairman, I had one item that I would throw out there, and I wouldn't even call it a high priority. But when I look at the application we had, and I had never really looked at our zones, I was really surprised at some of the areas that are temporarily in a zone for this event are not in a zone. I mean, as a local, I clearly view going to Allegiant Stadium, anywhere on Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, Frank Sinatra, as going to the Strip. And of course, as a local, I avoid it. But I don't know. And it could be a terrible idea to put that in a zone. It could be a great idea. I don't know. But I think it's something that I'd like to see industry and the administrator think about. We had a conversation about fires, high priorities and low priorities. And I guess since nobody's brought this up, this would be a low priority. But I was just really surprised. I thought, oh God, that's the Strip. There's a freeway in between it, but nobody goes there if they don't have to. It's a tourist corridor, and maybe it's a horrible idea and it shouldn't be in a zone. But that's something that struck me. I'd never really thought about the lines of the zones before I read the application, and I was very surprised that this is temporary.
So certainly could place on the agenda in a few months, giving you some time to gather whatever input you want to just kind of a status review of the zones. My perspective on the zones is that long before any of us, other than maybe Member Decker, were here, the agency went through what appeared to be a painful and painstaking set of public workshops and hearings and back and forth, and the former administrator Whittemore. Yeah, right. I mean, there was a lot of effort that went into debating and fixing them, determining them. I don't have a particular personal view on whether they need to be revisited or not. What I do have a particular view on is that I believe it would be very detrimental to the public and to the agency and to tourism in Southern Nevada to go back on the zones, because I think they have had a material beneficial effect on public perception of people who get off the airplane and are here for a weekend or whatever, for an event, that they know that it's a fixed charge. And I also think there is a significant competitive advantage for the industry in servicing the Golden Triangle of that relative to TNCs, who sometimes are their own worst enemies on this particular, competing in that space. That's just my take, but I don't have a problem if you want to take input and find out if there's some adjustment that should be made. And I do get your point about the west side of the freeway is now becoming new extension of the strip, you know, the Palms and new ownership of the Rio that's gonna spend a bunch of money redoing it. And there's land out there that casino companies own that they haven't done anything with, but could. So there may be east-west dimensions that we need to consider. And just so that the acting administrator or interim administrator knows, there also was a discussion based on my reading of the record at the time about whether something should be done with downtown as a zone, and whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. And that was, I think, vetted at the time and decided not to bite off that. But I think, not that we get a lot of long haul complaints that I'm aware of anymore.
No, not so much.
But that's one of the areas where the long haul complaints tended to center around, at least that's what the record at that time.
Well, I can tell you specifically, the first time I took over this agency, prior to the zones being implemented and after the audit, the very public audit, the irony was that long haul complaints were one of the major things that the agency was being tasked with addressing through the airport connector, which from my understanding, was originally built for the purpose of getting cabs to downtown quicker anyway. So I've fought with that for most of my time at the Taxicab Authority as administrator. The zones have cured that problem. And if you'll notice, there's only one long haul complaint. I remember seeing many months with 0 long hauling complaints because it's not an issue anymore. Now,
As opposed to 50.
Right, and I'm not sure it was that much of an issue prior, but there was the perception there was. I don't think we should do anything in reverse on the zones, but I agree with Member Soderberg 100%. I was shocked that Allegiant Stadium wasn't permanently in one of the zones. In this town, things pop up very quickly, and I think probably it would be up to industry to request that we take a look at the boundaries of any zone that they, but I was a little shocked as well that Allegiant wasn't part of a zone.
Okay. Other future agenda items? The only other item is the reports in March.
Yeah.
Anything else on agenda item 7? Hearing none, that'll take us to our final public comment session. This matter is placed on our agenda pursuant to Chapter 281 of the Nevada Revised Statutes to take comment from members of the public who wish to address us on matters within our jurisdiction or authority. We can take no action on those items, but we welcome any member of the public here present or with us remotely who may want to address us. Is there any member of the public in person who would like to make public comment? Seeing none, is there any member of the public participating remotely who would like to address us? No. There being no remote participants who want to address us, I'll close public comment session number 2 and entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
And moved and seconded, Soderberg and Decker to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. We are in adjournment.